All right. Hopefully everybody can see the PowerPoint screen. And good afternoon to everyone. Welcome to today's webinar, Intro to Sales and Use Tax Requirements. I'd like to thank all of you for joining us. A few logistics before we get underway. We are using the Teams platform today for our presentation. So if you aren't familiar with it, note that everyone should currently be in the listen only mode, meaning that you can't connect with us using your camera or your microphone, but you can using the chat. So I'm going to drop a quick comment in here. So hopefully that helps ping you to where that chat feature is in case you're having any trouble finding it. So as we go through the webinar, if you have questions, feel free to drop those in there for us. We are going to wait until after the presentation during the Q&A to answer those. We should have about 25 to 30 minutes for that. But if you type in your questions as you have them, we'll get them answered at the end. Last but not least, you probably saw me hit the record on this webinar. So it is being recorded. After we conclude, the recording and a copy of the PowerPoint will be posted to the Economic Development website training page. Now that all of that is out of the way, my name is Shelby Wood. I work for the City of Westminster in the Department of Economic Development, and my job is to help develop programs like this in order to help and support our small business community. It's hard to believe, but we are in the middle of our second year of developing these virtual trainings and webinars. The goal has always been to try to communicate resources and remain connected with you and your business. We've hosted a variety of webinars on city-specific topics, things such as homelessness, city resources, workforce resources, and now this one on sales and use tax. But we've also partnered with the North Metro Small Business Development Center, also known as the SBDC, to host a variety of topics more geared towards your business. So those topics like marketing, financials. I want to make a plug that we do have our next one coming up on August 18th, and that topic is finding your niche. So if that's something that you are interested in, the registration link is going to be on our website. But I do want to note again that all of these recordings and presentations are posted to that training library that I mentioned, including the ones from the SBDC. And remember that these trainings and webinars are free and they're going to be ongoing. So keep your eyes open for new topics in the months to come. So that brings us to the purpose of our webinar today. It's to share about sales and use tax. We have with us sales tax auditor Scott Jacobs, who's going to share the city's sales and use tax requirements for businesses located inside and outside of the city of Westminster. So Scott, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you, Shelby, and thank you everyone for being here today. Again, my name is Scott Jacobs, and you see my contact information there. That's my direct line and my email address. If you have any questions that come up after this, always feel free to email me or call, and then we'll have the main information for sales tax at the end of this presentation. So today I'm going to talk briefly about licensing, focused mostly on sales tax, the types of tax we have in the city, and then the returns that you need to remit that tax to us, and then some tips at the end that should hopefully help you in general, especially if you're ever audited. So first, in terms of licensing, a business and sales tax license is required for all businesses that sit inside of the city and some businesses that sit outside of the city. So it all depends on the definition of engaged in business. I assume most of you are probably either already located in the city or thinking of being located in the city. But if you aren't, if you just ship items into our city by UPS, you don't have to be licensed, although we prefer you to be. But if you are leasing, renting, or delivering directly into the city with your own truck, for example, or coming in and installing something, then you have to be licensed. And the business and sales tax license is all one. It's free. There's no charge to apply for it. And our city clerk's office handles that. All businesses within the city must be registered, even if you don't collect sales tax. And you must file at least once a year. So an insurance agency, for example, would never collect sales tax because they're not selling things, but we would still require an annual filing from that business, and it's due every January. So it's easy, but that's the way you can remit use tax even though you may not collect sales tax. We have three different filing frequencies in the city. When you apply for your license, you get to choose your filing frequency based on the delineations we have. So if you think you might remit more than $500 of sales tax to the city each year, you should be a monthly filer. If it's between 150 and 500, you should choose quarterly filing. And if it's less than 150 or zero, then you would be an annual filer. So you just choose what you think is best. Sometimes when you set up a new business, you don't know. It can always be changed down the road. You won't be penalized for choosing the wrong filing frequency. But you do have to file. So you have to file each month if your filing frequency is monthly, every quarter, even if it's a zero return. So that's the most important thing. Even if you have a zero, you have to file based on your frequency. Otherwise, you'll receive an estimated assessment in the mail. So let me quickly go over the 4 types of taxes we have. Not all of these will apply to most of you. The first 2 likely will, and the second 2 likely won't. First, of course, is sales tax. We all know what sales tax is. We pay it every time we go buy something. So if I go buy a Coke or pads of paper at Office Depot, they're going to charge sales tax. They're going to charge more than 3.85% sales tax, but the city's sales tax is only 3.85%. And everything I'm talking about here today only has to do with the city of Westminster. But of course, the state has tax, the county has tax. So when I buy something in the Jefferson County portion of Westminster, I'm going to pay 8.35% tax. 3.85% of that comes directly to the city. The rest gets remitted to the state and they divide it up. So if you're in the Adams County side, you'll pay 8.6%. And again, 3.85% comes to the city and the rest goes to the state. We also have use tax, which is the other side of the same coin. You never pay both sales tax and use tax on anything. But if you, as a business, go to a store, they're going to charge you sales tax. If they don't, they should, and they should remit that to us. But if you order something online, it's quite possible that that company may not charge you sales tax because they don't know, or at least local sales tax, because they don't know it. That's fine. But then as a business, you must remit that same amount, but we call it use tax. So if I order some furniture and I see that they haven't charged me sales tax, at least locally, then I need to remit that as use tax. Then we also have accommodations tax. This would only apply to hotels and motels. It's 7% on a room, for example, not in addition to sales tax. It's just 7%. And then we have admissions tax on tickets for certain items. So let me go into detail on these. Sales tax is only charged on tangible personal property. So services are not taxable in Westminster, but things are. So this is a definition from the municipal code, and it's very specific. A tangible personal property is anything that can be seen or weighed or measured or felt or touched. Really, if it's a thing, it's taxable. So if I sell candles, those things are taxable. But if I'm cutting your hair, that service is not taxable. So a hair salon, for example, and I'll use that example throughout, may have both items that are taxed if they sell product and services which are not taxed. And then use tax, again, is the same amount, but you're only paying that if you didn't pay sales tax on something. So a hair salon, for example, may order a chair for their customers to sit in. It's shipped to them. They see that they weren't charged any tax, which is fine. Then they'll take the total purchase price of that chair times 3.85% and remit that portion to the city. Any other tax would be going to the state. Often you'll see on your invoices that you're only charged the state tax when you buy something online, or state and county. So you'll see 2.9% or maybe 4%, but you won't see the full tax that you should pay, either 8.6 if you're in Adams or 8.35 in Jeffco. So watch that. Accommodations tax, again, it's only going to apply to a hotel or a motel. I don't know if any of you are out there. Short-term rentals aren't allowed in Westminster right now. If you have a short-term rental, you still have to, you shouldn't, but the 7% would still apply. And if we ever do approve those, the 7% will likely apply to those as well. But it's not in addition to sales tax, it's just 7% on the room, and then 3.85% if you sell sundries, or if you have a restaurant, of course, then that's what would be charged there. And then admissions may not apply to most of you, but if you're going to, if you have a movie theater or a regular theater, tickets will have a 3% tax on them. If you own a bar and you're charging admission for a certain amount of time, there's 3% on that admissions price, if you happen to do that. And then any public display of live animals, plants, insects, or fish. Right now, I think Butterfly Pavilion is the only one that would do this, but it would apply there, and then bowling alleys. So if any of you are in the boat of admissions tax or accommodations tax and you have any specific questions or you're unsure, just call us and we can verify whether or not you'll have those. But more than likely, most of you will deal with sales tax and use tax, or just use tax. Retail, of course, will always deal with both. So I wanted to look at the returns, or at least the sales and use tax return, so that you can see how that is filled out, and our initial use tax return, which you'll only fill out once. So I'm going to pull those up, as a PDF, so that they're easier for you to see. So here's an example sales and use tax return. This is the paper return. You can file online. Right now, your very first return must be filed on paper. Going forward, as of November, we'll have a new system, and that system will likely let you file your first return online. But if you're starting your business before then, I have a link in the presentation. You can download this PDF and then fill it out for your very first return. So here, we'll assume I'm a salon or a barber. Once you have your account number, it will go here. And that's very important so that we get all this information in the right account. If you don't have an account number yet, because it takes time to get one, it takes about 3 weeks, then you can put applied in this box, and then we'll know to create a miscellaneous account for you until you get your actual account number. We need to know the period for which you're filing. So in this case, let's say I'm filing, July's not over yet, but I'm filing all my July numbers and they're due by August 20th. But at least put the period covered in. We have to enter this exactly as you fill it out. We can't make anything up. So we need that information. And then your business name, you can use a DBA, that's fine. And maybe the first time, put your address in so that we can verify that. So in this case, for July, we'll say my total sales and services, and this is what you must put down is your total sales and services. If you only have services, then that's all that will go there. Will be put here. So we'll say I had $10,000 total for sales and services, and I do sell product. We'll assume that. I have no bad debts that I've collected. I don't think I've ever seen this filled out, but if you did suddenly collect bad debt, that would go here, and then you would add those two numbers together. So here it's the same, 10,000. But my services were 8,000 of that. So I didn't collect tax on that. There's no tax, sales tax collected, so I shouldn't pay that. So I need to deduct that here. And then in this case, it's probably unlikely, but we'll assume that I shipped $1,000 of product by UPS to my customers in other towns. So Westminster doesn't get sales tax on this. I had to collect it from those jurisdictions, or for those jurisdictions to which I shipped this product. So I get to deduct that amount too. And you'll see there are other deductions on here. We do tax cigarettes now. This is an old return, but gasoline we don't tax. Charitable organizations, be careful if they come in and say they're not taxable or they don't pay sales tax. They may have that letter from the state, but they also need a letter from the city if they're claiming they shouldn't pay city sales tax. And we're a little stricter about granting that exemption. So make sure you get documentation. They should have a letter from us, or you can check with us. And you want to keep documentation on that to prove that you didn't need to collect that sales tax, but that number could go there. So in this case, there's $9,000 of money here that I did not collect sales tax on, should not have collected sales tax on. So I get to deduct that from the 10. And now we see my total amount that sales tax is due on is $1,000. And hopefully my point of sale system shows that. It should agree with that. So I take that times the city's sales tax, 3.85%, I owe $38.50. If my system shows that I collected, or I see that I've collected extra tax somehow, I can't keep that, so I need to remit that. And then I have my total sales tax. And that's the sales tax section of the form that you would fill out, or the return you would fill out every month, every quarter, or every year. It could be that you owe no sales tax, and so you're still putting a total here, but your deductions will zero it out. An insurance agency, for example. So they're going to have a zero return in terms of sales tax. Then we have the use tax section, and that's just this line here. So let's say that I bought some furniture, it was shipped to me, and they didn't charge me local sales tax. So I know I owe 3.85% on that $2,000. So I put that total here times 3.85%, and I owe $77 because the vendor didn't collect it from me as a sales tax. So I do that here, add them together, and that's what I'm remitting for this period, month, quarter, or year. So that's all there is to it. A little farther down, there's Schedule B. You don't have to use this, but if you want to itemize your use tax, if you owe any, you can itemize those items here, come up with a number, and then put that here in line 8, and then still figure out your tax. And it is possible that you've paid some sales tax, let's say in Arvada, we'll give you a credit for that, but you'll still owe the rest. So for example, Arvada is 3.2% sales tax. We're 3.85%. So the business would owe the additional 0.65%. So you would have to figure that out and add that, put that here. Just make sure this number reflects that, because the system is going to look at this. So you may have to do some math here if you're taking the credit for tax paid in another jurisdiction. If you go to Broomfield, it's 4% local tax, so you don't owe us anything. We've given you full credit. You don't need to worry about it. But look at your receipt and see what you've paid. So this is the basic return that most people will fill out. The other return, and we can go back to this later if you have questions, of course. This is the initial use tax return. A business fills this out one time. It's due the month after you've opened. So if I opened in June, it's due by July 20th. And this return, again, is focused on use tax only. And it's looking to see if I owe any use tax on items I've purchased for my business or for the setup of my business. And we do look back 6 months. So if you open your business here and started in Westminster, that might have only taken you a month. But if you moved from Denver, you may have been planning that, and we will look for anything back 6 months. So you may have bought it in Denver, but if it was within that 6-month period, you need to look at it for this form. But we've categorized the form so that you can see if you have any invoices where you did not pay sales tax for these items or full sales tax. So in this case, we'll assume that I did buy office furniture, it was shipped to me, and they did not charge me Westminster sales tax. The total purchase price of that furniture was $5,000, so I'm putting that down here. That's all I found from that category. Nothing from these others, you just have to look through them and see. Some of them won't apply to you. Of course, food may not, if you don't have anything to do with food, medical tools. Here, for example, I'm going to assume that I bought cleaning supplies in Arvada. So I went to a store, they charged me Arvada sales tax, that's perfectly fine. I paid 3.2%, but I know I owe a little bit more on that $100 I paid. So I'm going to put that down here. And then I had no other items. We'll come back to this in a minute. So The total I owe on is $5,100 times 3.85% is a total of $196.35. But I'm going to take credit for what I paid in Arvada, and I can see on the receipt that I paid $3.20. I'm going to put that here, subtract it from the 196, and I really owe 193.15. I'm filing on time, so there's no penalty or interest. We can always waive penalty. If you're late with these, we will almost always waive penalty, but we cannot by law waive interest ever. It's 1% per month. So that's a reason not to be late with anything if you can avoid it, because if you owe any tax, sales or use, accommodations or admissions, you'll pay 1% per month that it's late. So I would just send this form in with a check. And if I send it in by the 20th of the following month, it's on time, and that's done. I'll never fill this out again. Any other use tax I owe going forward, I will do on the normal sales and use tax return in this section here. So those are the two returns that most of you will deal with, everyone in the city. If you're outside of the city, you don't need to worry about use tax. If you're in Denver, you worry about Denver's use tax. You'll never pay us use tax because you're not physically here, unless you have an office here or a branch. So use tax only applies to those businesses located in Westminster. If you're outside of Westminster, you're only going to deal with this sales tax portion of this form. Okay, I think I accidentally got rid of that. So I'm not going to go through the accommodations return. If you ever have questions about us, let us know, but it's very simple, but it's only focused on the accommodations tax. And you're of course only dealing with your accommodations numbers for the rooms you're renting out. And then admissions, you're only dealing with gross sales of admissions, not everything else you might sell, like the candy at the movie theater, that's sales tax. The tickets are admissions. Let us know if you have any questions about these. I have links in the presentation so you can find these very easily. So let me go back to our presentation and the tips section. Let's see from current slide. So some things that come up often, most of this is from an auditor point of view. Check your invoices, especially for your consumables. So those for anything you're buying for your business so that you can do business, make sure you're charged sales tax. If you aren't, you may owe use tax. This is of course for businesses in Westy. If you see that they only charged you 4%, they probably only charged you state, county, but they don't know what the local tax is, so they didn't charge it. So you'll owe that as use tax. And you want to pay it now rather than after you're audited, because you'll pay a lot of interest. It could be up to 36, 37 months of interest if it was from the beginning of your audit period. So pay attention to those. We can audit back 36 months from the time something is filed. So typically if you file on time, you'll know that we can only go back and will only go back 36 months. Save everything, your receipts, your invoices, preferably in PDF form. It doesn't have to be, but that's easier to send to us. So if you're audited, you may not be, you have all of that, but you are required to save 36 months of all your financial records for any audit that we might do. File on time, again, interest accrues on any tax owed at 1% per month. We can waive penalty, but after a certain amount of time, we won't. But for these first few returns, don't worry. We don't like to charge you penalty while you're getting situated. In terms of charitable organizations, Westy does not, like I said before, recognize the state's exemption for charitable organizations. Government is easy. We automatically, if it's an actual government organization, will tax exempt them, but not all organizations. So just because it's a church doesn't mean we've granted them tax exempt status. So it's best to check with us or get a letter from the organization that came from the city. Some of you will have sales of items and services. So for example, a plumbing company. If you bundle your services on your invoice for your customer, you have to charge sales tax on the total price. So that's a time when a service would end up being taxable. To avoid that, you need to list the service separately on your invoice from the materials, and then you only have to charge sales tax on the materials. Otherwise, you need to charge it on the bundled price. If you receive an invoice from a business that has done work for your business, look to see if it's bundled. Make sure that you've paid sales tax on the whole amount. Otherwise, you will, if you're audited, you'll pay it on whatever they didn't charge you. Sometimes they'll only figure it out on the materials, not the whole price. So it's better to keep those things separated. Then it's just more clear. Feel free to check with us if you ever think some vendor that you've dealt with online, for example, is not registered with the city. If you buy from a vendor in California, for example, they do charge you sales tax, so everything looks good, but they don't remit it to us. If you're ever audited, you'll pay again. So you could get the money back from them, but then you have to fight with that company. So if you're unsure whether or not they've remitted, feel free to call us. We'll look it up. We can say, yes, they're in the system. And then we will assume they're remitting the sales tax they collect from you. And if they're not, then you know, and you can talk to them about it. And returns in general are always due by the 20th of the following month. If it's a quarter for you, whatever, third quarter is always due in October. Just remember the 20th. If that falls on a Sunday or a public holiday, then it moves to the next business day. But if you just keep the 20th in your head, then you won't be late. The online system at the moment does cut off at 11:59 on the 20th or the due date. So our new system hopefully won't do that. It'll let you file late, but the current system won't. And I should have included a link to get you to the online system, which you can use once you have filed your first return on paper. So here are some links that I have, so you can click here and go straight to our website for sales tax compliance guides. So we have lots of good guides. You just have to scroll down for very specific areas that they explain the code in layman's terms. You can also just call us and ask questions. The forms I've linked there on our sales tax forms page. The online tax filing is there, and then the business license application, if you haven't filled it out yet, I've linked that. That goes through our clerk's office. They handle that for you, and sales tax approves it, and then we get the number. So that's all there if you need it. So that's all I have. I hope I didn't go too fast, but now I can take questions and go back to the returns or the slides if anyone has any questions. So Shelby, I'll hand it back to you.
Perfect. Thanks, Scott. Yes, I saw some questions coming over as you were presenting, so I'm going to back up to the first one and we'll just talk through them. If you guys think of questions as we're going through these, continue to drop those in there. We'll just work through them as time allows. If for any reason we run over, we'll absolutely connect with you after, do some one-on-one coaching if conversations go too far down a rabbit hole, if they're too specific. So know that those one-on-one opportunities are always available after our time today. Let's see. Mitzi says, I'm with a nonprofit, so we don't pay sales tax. Does this mean we're also exempt from use tax too? Hope you're muted, Scott.
Sorry, thank you. Yeah, you should be exempt from that as well. And in terms of the city, as long as we've exempted your organization, then you wouldn't pay either, because really they're the same side of the same, or two sides of the same coin. But I'm sure the state has exempted your organization. But if we haven't, then feel free to call me, and then we can talk about that, and I can show you how to get exempt for the city, and hopefully that would then happen.
All right.
I hope that
Karen
answered.
wants to know, how about the Westminster Brew Fest?
Whether or not, if there's an admissions ticket to the Brew Fest, sorry, I haven't been to it, then there would be tax on that admissions price, the 3%. And then anything sold at the Brew Fest, sales tax is applicable, and that's true of any festival. So even if it's a nonprofit event, if something is sold, then the vendor needs to collect sales tax. So if you mean that the tickets, if there are, I believe there are tickets to Brewfest, then the 3% should be collected and remitted. And you can do that on a special event form. I didn't bring that up, but if you're running a special event in the city, you don't necessarily need to get a license with the city, a business license, you might be able to just remit everything in terms of sales tax through a special event return, which is much easier. So if you have questions about that, let me know. But that tax would be applicable.
Thank you. And just to recap, Mitzi says, thank you. And yes, we're already exempted from sales tax by the city of Westminster.
Perfect.
And scrolling down, I did see, and I'll pop back up to the earlier questions, but Karen had a question, and I don't know if they're related to the Brewfest, Karen, so correct me if I'm wrong. Is iCloud software taxable?
Yeah, so software is taxable. We can always double check if you're unsure. But if your software in general is taxable, if you're using it to do something, so you're inputting data, like payroll software, you have to input all the data, then it's taxable. If it's just storing, I would have to double check. So feel free to shoot me an email with the specific software and what you do with it. And then we can verify whether or not you should be paying sales tax. If they're not collecting it if you're selling it, that could be your question, whether you should collect the sales tax. But if you're using it and they're not charging you sales tax, I can double check whether you should pay use tax on that, because that would come up in an audit. So it's usually taxable, but every once in a while there's a situation where the software isn't taxable because you're not really doing much with it. So sorry, that's not perfectly cut and dried, but feel free to reach out, call me or email me, and we can talk about it more specifically.
Okay, Karen does say we are using it, Adobe, but I think maybe that's a conversation for you guys to maybe connect on outside of the webinar and talk through the specifics. So Karen, definitely feel free to email me or email Scott directly, and we'll make sure that we get that more in depth for you, okay?
But chances are it's taxable.
Up. I'm probably going to say the name wrong. Desi says, I'm sorry to figure out what do you owe for sales tax and what do you do? I'm not really sure that I understand your question. Let's see. They put a follow-up in here that says, if I opened my salon suite in Westminster in March, but didn't start until April and said I was going to file quarterly, if I'm not able to do that, can I do it in October 2022 without a problem, just pay the late fee, right?
Yeah, you could file the return. So your quarter, let's see, if you opened in April, that's Q2, so you could file that. If you file the return late, you're just going to owe interest. We would likely waive the penalty because it's your first return, but you're still going to pay. If you don't file it until October, you're still going to pay 3 months of interest, so 3%. So if you can file it earlier, that will save you money. So you don't have to wait until the next quarter to file. You can still get it in late anytime. So feel free to send that in now, and that'll save you interest. And then if you receive anything in the mail, which you will, a notice of balance due for the penalty, just call us and we'll get that waived. So no need to wait, but you certainly can file it late. And don't forget about your initial use tax return also, because that would have been due already.
Go on to the next one. Let's see here. Ryan says, and it looks like he's got a two-part question, so I'll do the first one. I just purchased a car wash in Westminster. What about inventory purchased with the sale of the business? Tax was already paid on it when it was purchased. Must I pay use tax on it again?
Thank you for bringing up that question, because I meant to go over that on the initial use tax return right here. So when you bought the car wash from the previous owner, you do have to pay sales tax on all the assets, even though that previous owner obviously paid sales tax originally. Taxes owed, it's transactional. So every time an item is sold, even though it's used, or it's been depreciated, you owe sales tax on the market value of it. So your purchase and sale agreement should have listed the assets and valued them, and then that's what you owe use tax or sales tax on. You would remit that to us, or you can remit it to us through this form on line 8, and you could just put assets from purchase and then put what that amount is here and then calculate what you owe. So if you're unsure, we can look at your purchase and sale agreement, but you do, that's a very good question. You do owe sales tax or use tax, same amount, when you purchase a business on the assets only, not the total purchase price of the sale, only the assets and what they're valued at. And was there? Go ahead,
Part
sorry.
2 says, also, if I buy parts from my car wash and have them shipped to my house in Erie, that is okay as long as I file and take the credit on what tax was paid to Erie, correct?
Right, because they're going to charge you the Erie sales tax. I don't know what it is, but if it's, let's say it's 3%, then just pay the rest. We'll give you that credit, and then you'll pay the rest on as use tax. So we'll say 0.85% if they're whatever the difference is. Just pay that as use tax, and you'll be okay. Or you can just have it shipped. Well, I guess you can't ship it to the car wash, so but that should be fine.
All right. So Brian, let us know if you have any follow-up on that. Next question is from Lonnie. He says, what if I purchase from Amazon and the tax rate says 8.4%? Do I just pay 0.2% to the city and then manipulate the amount subject to tax on line 8 to make it match that total?
Exactly, right. So you've already paid this, somehow their system got it wrong. So just manipulate that amount. Don't put the full purchase price, just what it takes. I don't have the formula off the top of my head, but what it takes to get to that remainder amount that you owe. And then the system will see it right, and you'll be good. Otherwise, the system will think you owe on, if you put the full purchase price in, the system will think you owe on that, and you don't because you've already paid. So that's exactly right.
Next question comes from Anne. It says, if you want to change your filing frequency in 2023, how do you do that?
Good question. Anytime you'd like to change your filing frequency, we just need your request in writing, so you can send us an email. And I don't, you could send it directly to me, or I'll give you, I don't think I put it in here. We may have it on one of the pages. Our general inbox for sales tax is salestax@cityofwestminster.us. Just request what you'd like. So let's say your annual, well, and you want to become monthly, we'll of course let you do that. But let's say you're monthly and you want to become a quarterly filer, just make that request, include your account number and the business name. We'll look at how you have filed and what you've been paying, and then we'll approve it or not, but we'll make sure you know that it's been changed or not changed, so there's no confusion. But it's easy, and it usually always works out because you know what you've been filing and that you don't need to file as often. So just send us the email request at any time, and then we'll let you know when that can go into effect. But that's easily done.
Let's see. Manuel says, for a service-based business servicing multiple cities like plumbing, do you calculate sales tax differently for each city/municipality, or is sales tax based on office location?
So you'll calculate, good question. The answer is probably not what you want to hear. You'll calculate the sales tax based on where you're doing the work, not where your office is, if I understood you right. So if you're doing work in Westminster, you need to look at our tax. If you're doing work in Denver, you need to look at their tax. So it's where you're doing the work, not where your office is. That's a very good question. So that is more work for you. You have to look at the jurisdiction in which you're doing the work.
So I'm going to circle back because we've had a couple people follow up with comments since we left their question. Back to Karen, who had the question about the software and the iCloud. She said, how about software maintenance?
I believe that is taxable, but I would have to look in the code. It's been a while since I've looked at that, but I know because maintenance you would think might not be, that it's service based. So let me double check for you. So we'll just, as long as we know, sorry, I can't see the comments, but as long as I have access to your email, or if you email me, I can double check on that. I want to say yes, but let me double check so that you're not suddenly paying on that when perhaps you shouldn't.
Making a note, Scott.
Software is always, software is not cut and dried, unfortunately.
Back to Manuel says, also when I need a business license for each city for a service-based business.
Yeah, it depends on the city, but likely yes. So if you're doing business in Westy, in Arvada, in Broomfield, I would check with each one just to make sure. Some of them may have an exception, but chances are you need, because you're going into the city and you're doing work there, you probably do need the business and sales tax license. You definitely do for Westminster, but I would check with each one just in case there's one you work in that doesn't require it. They may make it a little easier for you, but likely you do.
Moving over to Paul. Paul wants to know, if I sell products through Amazon, where Amazon collects the taxes, are there any taxes my business owes, assuming customers came from Westminster?
As long as Amazon, I believe, should be collecting it all for you. Their system is smart, right? So as long as they're collecting it all, they're remitting it to us. So you shouldn't have to for any sale through them. And if it somehow comes out incorrectly on the invoice that your customer gets, then your customer, let's say it didn't charge them enough local tax, then likely they need to pay attention to whether or not they owe use tax wherever they live. So if Amazon's doing it for you, you should be fine. And if they do mess something up, then your customer really has to look at it and say, oh, I wasn't charged correctly. I might owe this as use tax. Obviously, private citizens, we all could owe use tax if we weren't charged sales tax. It's not just businesses, and we have a return for that too. So likely the business or just the regular customer you sell to will have to deal with it if it's undercharged, not you. But I'm sure Amazon, they usually get it right, and they remit.
Okay, next question is from Charles. He says, what about the new delivery surcharge?
Good question. That is not, Westminster has decided not to tax that. So, and it all goes to the state. So you don't, in terms of Westminster, you don't need to worry about that. We're not looking for you to tax that, and you're remitting that to the state. So anything that the new system is going to have some part of the return. If there's anything that has to be remitted to us, our new system will take care of that. But we're not collecting tax on it, so there's nothing to worry about. That can be separate and from the Westminster tax. Every jurisdiction could be different on that. So if you're selling online, you may want to check with the state, but each jurisdiction some jurisdictions may tax that.
All right, so I'm going to circle back, and if I'm butchering your name, please forgive me, to Desi. We had that first question that we weren't sure what they were asking, but they circled back and said the first question was, how do I figure out what I will owe of sales tax from the first form Scott talked about?
Oh, okay. On the sales and use tax return, I think is what she means. Let me find it here. So it's not it. Here it is. So if this, I believe this was the salon, which is kind of the example I was thinking of. You need to just, if you're service only, so you don't sell any product or any tangible item, then you're not going to collect sales tax and you won't have to remit any sales tax to us. So your deduction here, if your amount for the month was 10, your sales would be 10, and that would zero this out. In terms of use tax, you have to look at, for all the items you bought to do business, shampoo, your scissors, your chair, the mirror, you need to look at those invoices and just make sure you were charged tax properly. So let's say you're on the Adams County side in the city, then they should have charged you a total sales tax of 8.6%, 3.85%. Hopefully that vendor remitted to us. The rest they remitted to the state, and you're good. But if when you bought the mirror, for example, they only charged you 4%, chances are they didn't charge our portion of it. They focused on the state and the county. And so you would then owe use tax on that mirror, whatever it cost, and that's, you would remit here on the return. It's still the same amount, 3.85% comes to the city of the purchase price. But that's what you would do here. So there are always two amounts you're looking for. Did you pay sales tax? And if not, use tax as a business? And then if you're required to collect sales tax, have you collected it and then remitted it to us properly? So the salon would only collect sales tax if you're selling shampoo, conditioner, any kind of product. I hope that answered her question.
Anything in there, but we'll circle back if something else gets posted. So let's go on to Ryan. Ryan wants to know, can you explain the distinction between paying sales tax on price plus tax versus tax inclusive pricing, i.e. vending machine items cost $1, which includes tax?
Okay, that's a good question. So the only time you can include tax in the price is vending machine. And so if the vending machine item, obviously you can't make the machine charge sales tax. So in the vending machine, if you charge $1 for the item, then you can back the sales tax out of that and then remit that to us. And that's also true of alcoholic drinks that are sold by the glass, for example. So if I'm at the bar and I order a beer, a draft beer or whatever, then that price can also be put out as, say, $3 and the tax backed out of that. Any other time you can't do that. So if I'm selling candles or shampoo or a Coke, I can't do that. I have to say the Coke is $1 and then add sales tax onto that at the cash register. So if you need a formula to back that out, just email me and I can look for something to help you with that part of it if that's what you're asking. But if you, I think you might owe the car wash. If you have a vending machine there, you are allowed to do that, and we can help you with that if you need help. I hope that answered his question.
Well, Ryan, let us know if you need follow up on that. I'm going to butcher another name. I don't know if it's Ela or maybe Ella. Wants to know if you move your business from another city with all of the furniture and tools already in use for years, do I pay use tax on that used furniture and tools?
Good question. You do not. So if you had a business in Denver and you just moved to Westy, but you already owned all of that, you didn't buy it within the 6 months before you moved, you've just been using it for years, you do not owe us any use tax on it. You moved it here. It's true you're using it here, but we don't look for sales tax on that. Only new items you purchased within 6 months of moving here. So if you moved here in June, but you bought a new desk in February, knowing you were going to move here, then you need to look at that invoice and see you may have paid proper sales tax, you may have paid more than we would charge, and then you don't need to worry about it. If you owe the difference, then you would report that. But if you already owned it, you don't need to even think about it.
Okay, so the last question I see on here. So if I have missed your question at some point in scrolling through, I'll give it once more as Scott answers this one. Flag me, let me know, or type it back in. Happy to get that answered. We've got about 8 minutes left. But the last one I see on here is from Anne. She says, do you prefer we continue filing with the Westminster system or using the SUTS as an option by including your account number?
Good question. It's up to you. If you can actually use SUTS without an account number, but if you already have one, please put it in. So if you're filing in multiple jurisdictions and you find SUTS easier, then please use SUTS. It'll come through to us, and it works. SUTS isn't perfect, and we're working out kinks, but if something goes wrong, we straighten it out. So there's no problem. So if you prefer SUTS and it's easier for everything you have to do, feel free to use it. And if you have an account number with us, just include that. If you don't, we can't require you to, unless you're already in the city. But if you have it, then use it because that'll make everything easier. But if you find that our system is easier, just know that we're moving to GenTax as of, I think, November 5th, roughly. So if you prefer GenTax, we will have that in the future. That's the same system that Aurora has, Lakewood, the state. So you could use that, but it's really up to you. Either way, we get the money and everything usually works out. SUTS, I know at the moment, makes you file in both counties. So you might have a sale that was in Jeffco, and then you have to zero out the Adams County portion of it. So I've heard it's a bit clumsy, but if it's working for you, please feel free to use it.
Okay, well, I don't see anything else that's come over. So Scott, if you don't mind pulling back up the screen with the
Yeah.
contact information. Last call for questions, not permanently, but just for the sake of our webinar. If you do have things that you think of later, know that Scott is 100% available to have those one-on-one conversations with you, to help talk through your questions, comments, concerns, all of that. You're also welcome to reach out to me if I can help you with anything. Outside of that, I don't see anything else come over. So I think we're going to go ahead and say we're going to wrap up our webinar today on the intro to sales and use tax. Again, I'd like to thank everybody for joining us, and a huge thank you, Scott, for your time and your knowledge. Yuki says thank you. This has been a very informative session. And Karen says thank you too. So thank you everybody for joining us. Let us know if we can continue to help and support you, and look for those other webinars to come in the future. Have a good rest of your day.
Thank you.